Hey guys, Jay here and welcome to another cosplay tutorial. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. It's not based on any actual weapon or prop or whatever that already exists. I'm going to be making my own thing here. So what I'm making today is this axe. It's a basic fantasy axe that just is generic. And I just kind of made everything on the fly. I made all the decisions pretty much as I was doing them. So like the handle I didn't think I was going to have on there, but I did it anyway. The way that I did was all on the fly. So I'm doing this as a generic type thing so that you guys can make whatever you want, as long as it's an axe, I guess. But anything like this, a hammer or really anything else that's kind of similar in shape and size, you could make. But the easiest thing to make using this specific tutorial is a generic fantasy axe. So maybe you're doing a generic Barbarian or a generic, I don't know, a Dwarf or something. Something that would use a small to medium sized axe. Not one of those giant great axes, but something small like this. A character who would use this, that would be perfect for this tutorial. I'm gonna start with a 1-inch thick wooden dowel. This will be the handle. I made a template on my own time one day, which is what led to this video being made. I figured out how long I wanted the handle to be, and cut it with a hacksaw. I used the Dremel to flatten and smooth out the cut edge. I didn't like how small the template was. It didn't look right against this handle. It was noticeably too small, so I made a new, larger one. I traced and cut out 4 axe head pieces from some EVA floor mat. I cut out 4 because I'm going to have one blade on each side, and each side is going to be 2 pieces thick. And I do this on the textured side for 2 reasons. 1, gluing the smooth sides together makes the seam invisible. And 2, because I wanted it to have the texture on the sides of the blades because I thought it looked cool. I cut all of the curved areas out on an angle because I want all 3 of these sections to be beveled. The large curve is going to be the blade edge, and the 2 smaller curves are just because I liked how it looked. I glue everything together with contact cement, which needs to be almost dry before putting them together, or they won't glue correctly. And for every area that I use contact cement, I use 2 coats. EVA foam loves to absorb most of it. And here's what it looks like with one of the heads on. With both pieces up against the handle, I know I want to add DIY ornament halves to each side of the axe head. So I figure out the measurements of the center and cut out 2 squares on angles that act as a place where the ornament halves can sit. I center the ornaments as best I can and then trace it onto the foam. I can cut into the foam and use a heat gun to open it up, so the ornament can fit in the cut and get glued in with super glue. I start to bevel the blade edge, which I end up realizing is a waste of time, and move on to the other 2 areas I need to bevel. And I do these with the Dremel and end up using the belt sander to sand down the blade edge. And now I can put the main pieces together to see what it looks like. Then using all the pieces put together, I can figure out exactly where the centerpiece needs to go and glue it down with contact cement. I do the same on the other side. Now you could stop here and just glue the handle in place and have a nice axe prop, but I wanted to add more fantasy looking elements. I start by cutting angles into the corners of the centerpiece and use a Dremel to smooth them out. Then I super glue 2 strips of 5mm foam where the blade meets the handle. Using contact cement, I glue on a 15mm foam dowel that I cut in half lengthwise along the center between the 2 strips. I added a strip of 10mm foam to the top of the head to cap off the opening and give it a cleaner look. Then cut 4 smaller strips and glued them on top about 1/4 inch apart for some raised detail. Then used the Dremel to put an angle on the 2 outer pieces. I found this drawer pull knob thing in a woodcraft box that I bought at a yard sale about 8 years ago, so I used the Dremel to flatten out the sides of the bottom, so instead of it being circular, now it's squared off, which can fit between the 2 center strips at the top of the axe head. I sand flat and super glue random wood crafts that I also had from that old box, which are actually now in Ziploc bags, but whatever. It honestly doesn't matter specifically what I do for mine, because this is just a generic tutorial, more along the lines of a base for you to make your own designs. So don't worry about the little things that I'm adding and just do whatever you want for yours. I also add a strip of 5mm EVA foam to the recessed area of the knob to make it not really look like one anymore. Then I cover that strip with some 10mm foam dowel, also cut in lengthwise. Using the rest of that lengthwise cut 10mm foam dowel, I can use the flat cut edge against the centerpiece and wrap it around the base of the ornament. And I do this with the side of the cut that was on the table up against the ornament, because that side got a little bit more ripped and chewed up, and this makes it so that you can't see that. The last thing I need to do before painting is make a grip. Leather would be best, I just don't have any, so I cut 2 strips of 2mm foam that are about 1 1/4 inch wide. I cut 2 because 1 isn't long enough. Then I can glue on both strips with contact cement. And I overlap each layer just a little bit to give it some depth. To cap off the top and bottom of the grip, I use contact cement to cover them in more 2mm foam. Then to give the caps a little bit more flair, I glue on more of that lengthwise cut 15mm foam. For paint, I masked off the wood and ornament parts with painter's tape and sprayed all of the EVA foam parts with Plasti-Dip, followed by silver spray paint on just the axe head. The rest of the painting was all done with acrylics. I used dark granite on the pieces that hold the grip in place, as well as that piece under the axe head and the square the ornament sits on. I don't need to be as careful about much of the spillover because it'll get covered later. I use a purple that I don't really know how to pronounce. I think it's dioxazine. I'm not sure, whatever. I used that for the ornament, and it's one that I've had just sitting around for a while, so I decided to not shake it up as much as I normally would, so that it would be more watered down and have kind of a translucent look to it, rather than a solid color. I don't have a dark brown at the moment, so I mixed a normal brown with black to get a really nice dark brown color, and then I used that to paint the handle. Then that little bit that I glued onto the top, I painted black. I wanted to make the wood look more like it's been sitting around in the weather for a while, so I used a single coat of black directly onto the untouched wood. This lets the wood soak up a lot of the paint, which has a really cool look to it. Then I do an even lighter second coat and yet an even lighter coat of normal brown. Now that the base painting is done, I need to do a full dark wash over all of the foam pieces. So I heavily water down black paint and paint it into the corners as well as on the surface. I want this thing to be really old and dirty looking, so I paint it on and wipe off most of the pooling away, letting the black get really dark into the cut lines. Also, these cuts were made by just literally cutting into the foam with a knife or cutting those chunks off and using a heat gun to open them up. I did the dark wash the same way over all of the foam pieces, being sure to make it the darkest in areas that overlapped, like the way the grip was wrapped, or where the centerpiece sits on the head. Now it's time for dry brushing. I personally really like this brushed metal paint in brushed silver, and I use it to dry brush all of the parts I want to look more metallic. Dry brushing is where you wipe most of the paint off the brush on a napkin or something, so that there's only a very small amount left, and then you brush it onto the corners or areas that might rub onto things. I also like to use these extremely stiff bristled paintbrushes in all these various sizes that I have. They seem to work out a lot better than softer brushes. And I tried doing this on the cuts and the blades, but you really can't see them. The blades are actually really close to the same color silver, so it didn't show up at all. I very lightly brush along the top of the centerpiece so that the silver only goes on the raised edges of the texture. This is extremely subtle, but if anybody at a convention wants to take a look at it and see what I did, they'll be able to tell. Then I dry brushed that part that was on top that was just black, as well as the circle that encases the ornament, and the parts that were previously painted dark granite, and now they look more like metallic pieces rather than foam or wood. Alright, so that's it for the basic build. I want to do something right at the end here real quick before I close out the video, and that's tell you a couple of things that you can do that I didn't do, and I kind of wanted to, but I wasn't able to. I didn't have the stuff for it. Didn't want to spend any more money. This didn't cost me anything. I already had all of this. I mean, obviously, I had to buy this stuff at some point, but it was stuff that I already had and I had bought previously. Most prop makers are going to have a lot of foam just laying around, as well as like wooden dowels and PVC pipes and all that kind of stuff. So it's all stuff that you might be able to find in a workshop if you already make props or something like that. But there are a few things that I didn't do that I kind of wish I did. I really wish I would have made these square pieces magnetic so that they can come off with a hole cut out where the ornament goes rather than gluing it in place, because then I could frost it and add a light, just like I did with the Naofumi shield, but I didn't do that. So that's something you can do. You can add a light in there. I would have used one of those disc lights like this. I actually have one left over. So what these are is they just press, there's no batteries in this one, but the light, you can kind of see where the light would go in the center, and then they twist open, and they have, oh, this one does have batteries. You know what? I didn't know it had batteries in it, so that's good. Put this back on, and then twist it back on. If you would have Gorilla Glued this to the actual axe, the head of the axe, before putting that square on there, you could have had a light whatever color you wanted it to be. I would have used probably this blue or something because it would have worked with my purple really well and it would have been better. Or you could use this bright white with purple, like a really low purple paint, and that would be perfect. So you would just glue this right behind here, have it cut out so that the light can go through, and then just have this magnetic on so that you can take it off so you can take the batteries out. But I didn't think about that, so that didn't happen. Whatever, there's nothing I can do about it. Also, if you don't have one of these, you can get regular LEDs on a board, like maybe from a flashlight or something like that, or you can buy them in the strips that you cut off in certain amounts, and they'll still work as long as you solder them back to a battery. So you could do that too and do the exact same thing, but you would have to run a wire down and you would have to probably have a PVC pipe. You would just need to paint it to look like wood, which mine is already wood since it's a wooden dowel. So I don't really know how to make PVC pipe look like wood. If you do, cool, no, whatever. Or you could cover it in foam and give it a wooden texture or something. I've seen people do that. So that's something you could do. And then you could just have the battery at the end in a plug and then have the wires running up with that and have a switch that you put in the handle or something. Maybe put the switch down here so that you can click it and whatever. But I just decided not to do any of that. This was the easy way to go. So if you want to do that, that's how to do that. Alright, that's going to be the end of the tutorial. If you like this video, go ahead and give it that thumbs up. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.